So we are welcoming Pedro Navareño today. We're so excited. He's a member of STAR from Spain, and he's agreed to lead us in a discussion about some essential questions for education and schooling, as well as the role of education in society. And this is based on his many years of experience and his perspective. We're so excited about this. The talk, yeah, I think, Margaret, are we still in Spanish and English?
Well, he's going to speak in English, but if
Okay.
the things get difficult, he's going to speak in Spanish, and we have enough people here to
Oh, sure.
translate.
Oh my gosh, with Carlos
Okay.
and Gitza,
And
my
and
gosh.
if we have people who only speak Spanish,
Mhm.
then we will translate both ways.
Perfect. The
Mhm.
questions guiding Pedro's talk today and our interaction around it are: where does school come from? What schools do we have? And what school do we need or dream of? And Pedro, in his upcoming book, soon to be published, has been reflecting on schooling from different vantage points of his professional experience more than 4 decades. This includes his starting position as a primary school teacher, his role as a secondary school teacher and school counselor. He covers the gamut here, huh? His position as a tutor teacher at the distance university, and his final position as a supervisor and education inspector in Extremadura, Spain. Now during retirement, he not retired, he's renewed. He works as a volunteer and educational advisor, supporting and collaborating with the schools while writing this book. What an exciting spot to be in. The school proposal included in the book is based on principles such as the well-being of people and positive coexistence, professional learning communities, a curriculum for hope, experiential learning cycles, and formative evaluation and feedback. Welcome, Pedro, and thank you so much for agreeing to host and lead us in this interaction today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, Linda.
Oh, you're welcome.
Miss,
No hay de qué.
for me, it's a big pleasure to share with you. And the first of all, I would like to thank Margaret for the opportunity to share with you all some ideas and reflection on education, which are the result of almost 50 years dedicated to education from different professional roles that I had been developing. The book uh, is a publication that we offer a vision of education and the school from the perspective of a teacher who is passionate about profession, who believe deeply in human perfectibility. It is an approach from a holistic global vision of the school to overcome and go beyond any educational system. It is very important for me to say that the content of the book is about all an introspective reflection on my thoughts and idea about how education and schooling should be understood rather than a purely academic work. The content of the book, the structure of the books is in four parts. The first part I have called the melting pot of emotion and apprentices teacher. The first chapter looks back at the school we come from, starting with the Prussian school at the germ of the modern school, which served as a model for many schools around the world, especially in the Western world. The second chapter, which analyzes the school we have, is a reflection on the school and the education we have always from the perspective of my professional experience. I reflect on evaluation, teacher training, leadership, etc. The third chapter, which is the central part of the books, presents the essential key to building the school that we dream of, that we need. These are the principles that we believe should inspire the educational institution beyond any educational system. In other words, is a universal proposal for any school, in a school in different contexts. Before presenting the three chapters that make up the book, I wanted to present the session I have called the melting pot, or the emotion of an apprentice teacher. This is a description of an autographical nature and aims to bring the reader face to face with the writer to find out about his desire, his vision, and the place through which his thoughts pass. It is a broad outline of his professional life as a school teacher, as a guidance counselor, secondary school teacher and supervisor, and also as a teacher for a short period of time at the distant university. In this chapter, we reflect briefly on the origin of the modern school, which can be seen as the Prussian school for the Western world. In a way, the school we have today has its origin to a large extent in the approach that were developed there. I will now focus on the first crisis of the traditional school, which resembled a factory, and on the emergence of the new school as a necessary response to continue moving forward. In Spain, is reflected at the end of the 19th century with the emergence of the Institución Libre de Enseñanza as institution that left a deep mark on our education system, but certainly also in Latin America. The new school is the first great revolution against the traditional school made in the imagine and line of factory chain production. In the 20th century, it is important to highlight the post-war period with the publication of the Declaration of the Human Rights and the need for a new vision of the world. The main revolution of 1968 as a manifestation of the new generation against the established set order, demanding more participation in political decision. Phyllis Kuhn report on the same year, education crisis, and is an announcement of the need to reform education system. Publication of books such as the Unschooling Society and the School is Dead, Reimer, Elite, which is a critical manifestation against the school organization of the time. The publication on multiple intelligences, Howard Gardner in 1983, which break the idea of the single intelligence that had been dominant until then. The contribution on emotional intelligence, Peter Salovey and John Mayer, which changed the way people learn, but it needs the Daniel Goleman to popularize it in an extraordinary way, this concept. The PISA report and the international assessment have their impact on education with revolution international assessment and are offered as a universal criterion for measuring the actuality of education system. The third chapter, the concrete aspect or principle that we propose. The first one is the school as a space for care, well-being, and positive coexistence. The second one is the collaborative teacher training for the creation of the professional learning community. The third is an organizational that layer and generate the answer it needs for itself. Distributive pedagogical leadership and backbone of the educational community. A curriculum based on the hope and the achievement of ESIS profile for critical global citizens that prepare to face local and global challenges. Formative and authentic evolution as a basis for learning to learn. Open school with the integration of technology at the service of the common good. Development of experiential learning cycles for sustainable innovation and continuous school improvement. School supervision as a pedagogical advice and support to educational institutions. And a school for the common good, human rights, human dignity, social justice, and the achievement of democratic citizens. All the book is about what kind of citizen should we train for the 21st century. Persons who are creative, critical, peaceful, caring, responsible, and committed to the society of their time, enterprising, competent, prepared to face diverse personal and professional situations full of the uncertainty, with the ability to design and develop life projects worthy of being lived individually and collectively. The most important thing probably is the last question. This, for me, the education, the school, they have to address their effort to get all people the school teach to learn to build and develop life projects worthy of being lived in a global and interconnected world. And the book ends with an invitation for everyone to ask themselves about their ideas on education and how we can be the active member that our educational community needs. Thank you very much. This is the small presentation that I want to do. Thank you very much.
Pedro, this is really exciting. It reminds me when I was in my doctoral program, early on, I was reading books by Peter Senge, his original writings. And then over 20 years or so of time, he wrote a book. I'm going to reach up for it, so I'll probably look funny when I'm reaching right here. I think it's this one. Let me see if I have it. Yes, called Presence. And I thought, you know what the difference was for me was in the latter book, his wisdom. He talked about going through all of these changes, but through his own experiences and perspective, which was so fascinating to me. And the difference was wisdom, right? At the end, it was the wisdom. And that's what I feel from what you shared just a bit ago. I'm excited to. Do you have a title for your book? ¿Un título para su libro?
I don't know exactly.
Not
In
yet?
this moment, the book is in edition, and I don't know. I finally the title is "The School We Come From to the School We Need," and the subtitle probably is from the mental pot of the apprentice of education. In Spanish, is I can sería de la escuela que venimos a la escuela que necesitamos.
Mhm, mhm.
Y el subtítulo sería desde el crisol. I don't know exactly how do you translate in English. El crisol de un
Melting pot, maybe.
melting pot.
Mhm.
Mm, melting pot de un aprendiz de maestro. Yeah, in the book, I speak about the apprentices because it's very important in our life to be always along the life an apprentice because always we are
Mhm. Learning.
learning.
Mhm. Pizza.
Yeah. Well, Pedro, congratulations because it's a very interesting book.
Yes.
I'm so happy that you shared that with us tonight. And of course, as I saw you going through it, many questions came to my mind, really, no? Because somehow you really uh, introduce us for a trip, let's say, through education, no?
Mhm.
Through
Yeah.
the different stages and the different authors.
Mhm.
So I really wanted to know, uh, in a sense, did you define the book in relation to education as training or education as an art? Let's say, if I could put it in that way.
Mm.
Yes,
Because there are so many conceptions there, no, in
yeah,
that part that you refer to it as training.
yeah,
Why? I really wonder why.
yeah. I don't believe in the dualism, yin and
Mm-hmm.
yang. I think the profession of teacher is more complicated than
Mhm.
this kind of thing.
Mhm.
We need, obviously, if you have a good capacity to communicate to other people, is essential for our profession
Mm-hmm.
every day, is obviously. And the people, they have this capacity, they have an advantage about other different people that they don't have the same capacity to communicate. I think the teacher is possible to build, to get a good teacher if you don't have any artist capacity special. Uh, for me, it's more important the attitude, the disposition of the person to do. In the book, I write different sentences about that
Mhm.
because for me, the best teacher is not the teacher that they know or have more knowledge. It's not.
Mhm.
For
Mm-hmm.
me, the best teacher is the who want to learn everything for to give everything to the student.
Mm-hmm. So
It's
you are
not.
more with this idea of an art, the teacher as an artist, let's say, that
Ah,
Well,
it- it-
somehow
he's
yes,
configurates his
he's trying to deny that.
education in
He's
The,
saying
relation
he's
to
saying
that art, no?
no,
Like
but
in the.
maybe he's saying more it's teacher as a mutual learner is what I'm hearing. And there's
yeah.
probably artistry to that and learning and, so many complicated things. But I think
Mhm.
that really is a different perspective. And it ties so beautifully to action research,
Exactly,
particularly
yeah.
action research, because if all teachers are
Mm-hmm.
actually all members in a learning community
Mm-hmm.
approach their work in that regard, how can
Mm-hmm.
I really reach my students? How can I help them achieve the goals they want to achieve? How can I do a better job? Same thing with the administrators in the program. What a different place schools would be.
Oh, and also, if they did that, they would leave the knowledge that they gain
Mm-hmm.
from teaching at the school. I know I've said this before, but the when I asked a teacher what she would most like when she was starting out at a school, she said she would like to be able to go look at videotapes of teachers at that school teaching the lessons that she would be teaching with the students that she would be working with,
Yeah.
so that she could
Mhm.
understand in a deeper way what the combination of the art and knowledge looks like in a classroom with students that she's likely to have. But the thing I wanted to say is that when I looked at trying to imagine what a school of the future might look like, my sort of major shift in my way of thinking of the school is that there shouldn't be just one kind of teacher. And I don't mean discipline kind of teacher, but one kind of functional teacher. There's there's so many different kinds of skills that are needed in a school. And if you think about a doctor's office as similar, there are lots of different kinds of skills that go into helping people help you with your medical issues. There are people who
Mhm.
run tests, there are people who um, have specialties that evaluate you in those specialties. There's people who are, there to help you make sure you get through all the different people that you need to get through. So in a school, there's a need for childcare. There's a need for playground monitoring. There's a need for moving kids from place to place. Those don't take a whole lot of skill and could be jobs for people who are transitioning from college to adulthood and need some experience with kids.
Mhm.
They could be 3-year appointments, and it would free up teachers to be invested in teaching and not be invested as much in all of the little sort of logistic things that go into keeping kids in a place for a period of time. And then in the teaching area, there could be teachers um, whose design is evaluation. That was one of the things Pedro pointed on it, the
Mhm.
role of evaluation. There could be teachers who teach to evaluate, and there could be teachers that are deep in a particular subject area and teach to explore and understand and develop projects, as again Pedro was saying, projects in that area. So they have the science or the literature or the academic background for that kind of an activity. But the evaluative teacher would then be checking on whether or not these students are getting the skills that they need. So that person would teach to assess skills, not teach for content. And these different kinds of teachers could work together in teams. They would have different amounts of time in the classroom and out of the classroom, because there would always be a person who's monitoring the teacher, monitoring the students in the classroom. Like, you might call that teacher the community teacher, who's in charge of making sure the students are where they are and doing the projects that these other teachers assign to them. So they're kind of managing the classroom in the way that nurses and receptionists at a hospital manage the movement of you from doctor to room to examination to specialist. So school could then be a place with people with many different roles, and that would take the teacher out of the classroom for chunks of the day so that they could engage with professionals in their area of expertise. So they're not always with children, they are also with adults. Because we ask people to give up quite a bit when we ask them to be school teachers. To spend your whole day, every day, in the presence of children robs you of the intellectual exchange with adults, and it's a big sacrifice. But if and it causes a lack of growth that comes from deep dialogue in your work about work with adults. So if you had teachers out of the classroom for good chunks of the time so that they could collaborate with other teachers and other experts in their area, then you would have a much richer engagement with the students because they would be bringing knowledge from lots of different places. Anyway, I'll stop, but that's my vision. Maybe somebody else wants to share their vision.
Well, I
I
I
think
got to I got to live two different experiences as a school leader. And boy, was I aware of my responsibility as a leader to how do I say, to take teachers out of that isolation and create spaces for them to collaborate, not just out of the classroom with the kids, but out of the classroom and out of the school. Because I believe in the experiences of the community and the world at large too are important. One of the schools that I worked at, it was a small public school, so it was public, it wasn't private. But I was able to have 7 specialists, which was really exciting because as they were teaching and interacting with the students, the teachers were able to observe and they learned those specialty skills, whether they, replicated them or not, but they did, which was fascinating. They also had times when they didn't go with the students. And it was for all sorts of things. We had it for languages, we had it for science and technology, and a number of things. And I also hired, like you're saying, Margaret, I hired physical education coaches, did all of the monitoring of things like lunch and bus duties and all of that. So there were none of those kinds of responsibilities for the teachers.
Yeah,
And
that's
the kids,
ideal.
the kids behaved ideally.
Hmm.
But the difference was that school had a different type of funding and it was a wealthier community. So they had quite a bit more per student. So that was a good fortune of that. But I did have another school before that where the superintendent came to me and he said, I'm going to give you $250,000, which was a lot of money in 1983, to turn this school around. And I want you to make it a year-round program and come up with as many creative and innovative ideas as you can. So then we brought in, that was a different school, but I had 800 students there, and we brought in community partnerships. So we had a music keyboard studio, and we had a science technology program, and we had 3 teachers always working together with reduced class size, and they were able to collaborate. So teachers had time to do that. And I'll be quiet because everybody else has so many great ideas. But I just want to say one thing. I think that the bus drivers and the lunch supervisors, they all have to be in on it.
Yeah.
And particularly those people who watch the kids before and after school. Because those kids that get dropped off at 6 and don't get picked up till 6 in the evening, it's like being institutionalized. So when we could bring those folks and help them understand how critical their role is in those kids' lives, it's just when they made it fun and were actually interested in what the kids were learning, and they would do things on the bus and in the daycare. And the one last thing that made me really think about that, as a little girl was lost one time at school, and I found her in the library, and she was like 9 years old, and she goes, Dr. Purrington, I have to be in lines all day long. We're on a clock. It's do this, do that, do this, do that. She goes, I just wanted to be alone. And I went, oh my gosh. I go, okay, so we're changing things. We're going to open up the library. We're going to open up the ceramic studio. We're going to, for a little bit extra money, and the parents were willing, we're going to create experiences like most schools don't have, after school and before school. So their life can be enriched and not, anyway. So I could go on and on because it's been my life's work to try to come up with the ideas.
Yes.
But
Well,
Pedro, it's so exciting to see all these influences and what you've observed and what you see might be possible through understanding them all, if you will, and creating this, incredible, bringing
and
this idea to fruition. Go ahead.
and instead of principals always being the person who's evaluating the teacher, having principals co-teach a lesson
Oh
with
yeah, I did that.
with teachers is a way to both evaluate and teach at the same time. So if everybody at the school teaches, then you have a learning community and with different roles.
And Margaret, that's action research again, because I didn't know what action research was at my first school. But by the second school, I used coaching. And so my experienced teachers, they were action researchers. I go, what do you think you need to do to improve? And they led the whole coaching conversation. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the newbies said, I don't even know what I don't know. So I want you to tell me. So
Uh-huh.
you had to differentiate that feedback, whether it was assessment, maybe for the younger, newer teachers or less experienced, but for the older, it was like being a partner in their learning and kind of holding up a mirror and being a coach for them. I didn't have to say a thing. I So you're right.
And if there was a career line where you could shift from one kind of teacher who's a kind of lower paid teacher to a higher paid teacher that takes more work and more intellectual engagement, then there wouldn't be as much burnout. We really have more of a retention problem than we have a recruiting problem. Because when you lose 50% of your teachers after 5 years, I don't know what the current percentage is, but
Yeah,
that's what it used to be.
intense.
You lose all that work that you put into training, helping those teachers get good at what they do. You lose all of that, and that's because they feel like they're in a dead end. They've mastered what they were doing, and they want something more. And so by having various roles, you move from
Yeah.
being the person who monitors kids to being the person who maybe teaches science to being the person who evaluates the science to being a principal or to being a coach for other teachers. And so there's a sense of role differentiation and career advancement that you could have in a school that I think we lack miserably in schools. And that's why we have such a retention problem.
I wanted to
Pedro, are you
ask Pedro,
understanding? Wait a minute, let me just stop and say, Pedro, are you understanding?
Pedro.
So I understand the general message, but I don't understand perfectly all the things that you say. In my experience, about that you tell before, I think that a school organization is a very complex organization, and not always in all school is the same. In my experience as a supervisor of different school, with the same situations, social, cultural, economic situation, all the people, the student, the family, even the teacher, in general, the school, there are schools that they have a very good practice. It's a pleasure to visit this school, and the other one near, 10, 15 kilometers, one from other. Is the opposite. It's not possible to grow in improve, enhance the school. And when you look deeper, more than you can see when the oil age, and you understand what is the difficult in one or in another school. And for me, the leadership is more important than the resource investigation tell us. A good leader, and when they integrate all the community, is a dynamic person. They have influence in different person of the community. The school can change in a few years. They can change extraordinary. And the evaluation of the teacher is one important aspect, is vital. And in the book, in one part, in one chapter, in the third chapter, I present one system that is very good, and we use in many institutions in Europe, in American, in different countries, and always they is good. Is 360 degrees. We use the individual evaluation, the co-evaluation, the alter evaluation, at the end, the whole process, we propose, we have to check if the change, the innovation, the improvement, all things that you do in the school is the fourth part of the 360 degree. The other part is the community. They have appreciate the change, the improve, the enhance. If they don't appreciate this situation, all our work is false. It's not true. It's not right for this school. And in this evaluation, in the first path, the teacher, they have to review their practice. We give them a good guide, a guide elaborated for all teachers in the school. And then everyone, they have to use alone in the first time. They have reflect about their practice. And then when they write and check their practice, they have to compare it with other colleagues. True. And they must to observe the class one and another one, and they change the role.
And that's the power of action research.
Yes, and then they have to take note, to write down about that they observe in their colleagues, and the other one at the same. And then
it is like what you have in Malaga University, no? When you remember that we had people from there in
lesson study.
with us.
Yes, I remember.
And then it's in relation to what was brought from Japan, no, to England, and how this group from Spain worked there for nearly 10 years.
Yes.
So that they could build that philosophy of collaborative teachers working together and interchanging roles. That is exactly what you are describing.
Yeah. But there are many possibilities to apply this kind of the situation. For me, I don't know exactly how you say it in English, los matices, the way that you apply this system can be very different in one situation or another. It's very important. At the first time, when I support some institution, the first question that I tell them is my support is only to accompany, not to lead the
changes.
The supervisor is not to lead the change in the school, is to support to the leader of the school that they have to take the decision important in their school. You only have to do similar the coaching to give them the fundamental question that they have to respond, to answer.
Yeah, like in the lesson study, yes, exactly. A coach.
Katie, does these trigger any ideas for you or questions you might have? Sorry, I did too much talking before. I need to listen to everybody else.
No, just lots of thoughts. This is all really the earlier the dialogue about it being an art, or what does it look like, reminds me of Merleau-Ponty's work. I don't know if anyone's familiar with existentialism. but Merleau-Ponty, the work about embodiment. So our interactions are all relational, and the ways in which we move through the world and make meaning is through those engagements. And he's one of my favorite philosophers because he dances. And there's quite a few counseling theories, especially within South American nations, that relate to that embodied practice. So you have, theater, you have more of the dance and a movement. And so I think of that in my teaching oftentimes, how that interaction um, plays out. In some ways, it's an art, but in many ways, it's also thinking about how am I delivering content. It's contact. Like how am I making contact with the students and the material, and then in that contact, creating this space or this learning or this new knowledge. So the dialogue has reminded me of this, and also how similar school counseling is in relation to this. Because my students, it's all about the relationship and how do you help students um, gain the skills to self-advocate for themselves in the classroom, and the ways that we try to support that and uh, motivate them in that way. So yes, all good things. But yes, the conversation about, I wrote down the book too about presence that you mentioned, because it's very much similar to embodiment and contact, and um, how you make meaning from that relational experience.
So another person, Carlos, who has done amazing things with kids in schools, and both in face-to-face schools and in distant schools, and getting kids involved in action research. And I know he can't get his camera to work, but I know he's here. So Carlos, do you want
Yeah.
to tell us?
Well, I would like to say that when I see from the other point of view the work of a teacher, no, most of from the point of view of somebody who has to make the organization work. Uh, there are some parts of the teaching profession that nowadays makes it quite difficult. One is the relation with the parents, and that is because the uh, somehow that's a Peruvian case. No? It's a Peruvian case in which the I mean, in the time I was a student, the teacher was a kind of authority. Nowadays, any parents go to school and then can, uh, how can I say, behave with the teacher the way that Trump behaved with Zelensky, more or less, I would say. Yeah, in
Embarrassing.
yeah, okay, and that is the thing that makes more difficult for the work of the teachers, because that's a pressure, no? Let's say a psychological pressure. And that's the one of the things. Now that I don't have a regular school, it's much nicer, because the condition is, if your kid is not happy, oh, he can go apart, and they don't need to come, and everybody's friends. So the pressure for
Wow,
this relation with the parents is gone. Well, that was my observation, let's say.
interesting.
Hmm.
It's happening here too. Yes,
Mhm.
um, the Department of Education actually just released a website where parents and community members can report teachers who they believe are teaching subjects of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh my,
And it's to then put a spotlight on schools that the federal government can then investigate and pull funding from. So it's here it's very much elevated now, to where teachers and even counselors are really struggling with how to continue to do good work and while also keeping themselves safe to the best of their ability. Um, but that is happening here now.
Katie, will
Mhm.
you remind everybody where you're at? Because everybody may not have been
Yes.
here last time.
So so I'm located in New York State in Buffalo, which is close to the Canadian border, actually. Um, so I work at the University at Buffalo, and I train school counselors who work with children from kindergarten to 12th grade. Mhm.
Mm.
Diversity is a human trait. It's a human protection. It's not a bad thing. It's what keeps us alive. If we didn't have people with different kinds of brains and different kinds of systems and different kinds of both advantages and disadvantages, we wouldn't survive as humans. That when things get tough, people with different kinds of skills are the ones that are able to move up and keep us going as a race. It's just inane that we would make diversity a bad thing. Diversity is what makes the human body
It's
work,
rich.
both in the inside your body and in the outside world. I mean, what we should be studying in school is our brains. Each of us has a unique brain that has some affordances and some difficulties. And the difficulties are often socially determined because it's that you have difficulty in a social setting. If you change the social setting, you won't have difficulties. So there's difficulties in constrained situations, and then there's affordances, things that you can do that nobody else can do because of the way your brain is wired. And understanding that, which is to understand diversity, would give us a much richer understanding. It's not that we have some people that are neural normal and some people that are neural diverse. It's that we're all diverse, and that diversity is our strength as a human population. And helping kids understand that if a person
Mm.
doesn't see, it doesn't mean they are limited. It means that they have other senses, that they have super senses that are different than ours. And so it's not seeing what people don't have, it's seeing what people have. And each of us owns this thing that's inside our head, and we should understand it in the best possible way. And school doesn't help us do that.
Mm.
I think it just takes one, I won't even call them a leader, like we have right now in the United States, to just put a match to the fuel of what I call the isms: racism, sexism, heteros, that whole list, right? Ableism. I mean, and that's what we're experiencing here. And when that influence is worldwide because of economic interdependencies and whatnot, we're seeing it's like a green light in so many situations where we're kind of seeing this rekindling, if you will. I think it's like a hatred, Margaret. I think it's racism
Yeah.
in an aspect of diversity.
Yeah.
That
It, it,
they're
it,
stoking that fear. People are of differences, if you will,
yeah.
and that perspective that it's not richness and broader perspective and whatnot that it brings us, but it takes something away from us that's ours inherently, like that whole white privilege perspective, and it's kind of running rampant again in places,
Yeah.
especially we have billionaires like Musk investing in Germany and
Well, he comes from South
party.
Africa and lived a life of privilege as a kid and had it taken away from him, basically, and he thinks he should have it back. And uh, this the latest thing I heard was that they wanted to take away multiple pricing in corporations, that was wrong, that you shouldn't have senior rates and you shouldn't have student rates. You should have only one rate, and no company should be allowed to give anybody a different rate, which is, again, this kind of wanting to have, it's the white young man wants to have everything that they can possibly have, and they don't want to take care of old people, students, people of color, people. It's sad.
Mhm. Mhm. But
I,
it seemed like school would be a safe place and a
yeah,
place to
but
counter those ideas.
what Katie said is it's not a safe place.
Right. No,
They're making it an unsafe place,
not when you have investigations. Yeah.
and that's what happens is you start having a propaganda approach to schooling rather than a exploration and thinking approach to schooling. I mean, we're talking about how wonderful schools could be if we really encourage kids to think, encourage kids to have projects, encourage kids to explore their own thinking. But in a society where you don't want that to happen, you use fear as a tactic, and you close down diversity, you close down investigations, and you dictate what kids will learn, and you make people afraid if they're deviating from that storyline. And that's how you control a population.
I never thought we'd see this again, Margaret. When I was first a teacher in the late 70s, I remember this whole idea of English as the only language was, so talked about, and there was so much fear, and like we could only hold one language in our brains. And I thought, how can people not understand this? And why do they believe that? But there were in Santa Ana in California, which was a high number of both Spanish only speaking, bilingual, and English only speaking people. There were book burnings, burning all the books, and I mean public displays of book burnings of the books in Spanish. And I remember
Wow.
being offered a job, and I go, I can't take a job in your district. I can't be that. I was a bilingual teacher. And I said
Uh-huh.
no. And I went elsewhere because what beautiful languages. And then we saw this big transition, right, to
Multilingual,
transitional
yeah,
programs to dual immersion and whatnot. And now this is such a departure
yeah.
from all the work that's been done in programs to create this, beautiful study of languages and cultures and uniquenesses, and also what we have in common that brings us together. Um, yeah, the speech we heard last night, to those of you maybe aware, maybe not, but President Trump gave an address to Congress, right, to the world, and he was declaring, all the things, the orders he signed. English is our language. The Gulf of Mexico is no longer, it will be the Gulf of
America.
America. Greenland, he wants to co-opt. Panama Canal
He
brings
wants
back
to
the
take
direction. I mean,
colonies.
just one thing after another. And I love the response afterward. He looks at things through the lens of a real estate developer,
Yeah,
Mhm.
not a world leader, and someone who wants to bring the world in harmony and in peace and interdependence.
yeah. He's an imperialist. He wants to be the king, and he wants more territory. And it's scary. It's a very, very scary time.
See, this is new for us, but I know in other countries, some of you are probably smiling too. You've lived with dictators and other
Mhm.
dictator type rulers for years.
Well, I
And
know my husband is smiling, but it's a little bit of an irony. He's from Iran,
mm,
and for him, it's this irony having immigrated here because of the sanctions.
mhm.
And so this, having the perspective of how much of an imperialist and we are as a nation, and now it's coming back, right, to bite us. And so in some ways, he's seeing
Interesting.
it's this vision of self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But at the same time, he's living here. And so it's having that global perspective of how we're moving into a multipolar world in some ways is, I think there's hope in that, and in other ways it's still quite scary with the transition of what it means for this nation and our this United States.
What we're talking about is so powerful because Pedro's talking about school, but he's talking about something much bigger, right? How do we bring about this vision, if you will, that Pedro's been sharing? I think you talked about those 10 really important ideas that would work together kind of seamlessly, if you will. I kind of think of a quilt in my mind is sort of the metaphor that comes together, but and how do we do that in the world as a whole too? I think there's quite a parallel.
I was surprised somehow, no, well, that it is clear that, for instance, for Trump, the US should be only English only, but I think that it's not English only, because I saw one interview, no, one presence in which an Indian journalist make a question, and he says, I don't understand your accent, and poof. So that would mean that there will be a unique English accent also.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh
He's
my,
dismisses.
really?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's difficult, huh?
It's just insulting to people. It's so difficult. All right. Well, I think that we've had a rich discussion over what
Mhm.
education could be and what are the obstacles that are keeping education from being as open and as free as it could be. Action research is a way to build a rich learning institution. And I think we all need to work doubly hard in each part of the world that we're in. And for those
Mhm.
of us that are in America, we have to um, use our voices and whatever leverage we have to keep diversity as a strength that we share internally, externally, in the society. Diversity is a powerful attribute of human life and should be celebrated, not denigrated. And that's, I think, a lot of what is in the discussion today of our hope for the way schools can be. Thank you, Pedro, for starting
Yes,
off and for sharing your
yes.
ideas.
Oh my gosh.
We all look forward to your book, and
Yes.
we'll share the information on it when you get it published.
Yeah, let us know.
And that
Mhm.
the idea of a personal account wrapped into a professional exposition of your ideas is a really interesting one. Linda, I think you should be writing a book similarly because you've had a rich,
Because I'm
rich
old now.
context
I'm older now.
of
I thought about it.
experiences that could really help us think through this time. So, it could be your response to the current administration. I think each of us bears a responsibility to find the
Yeah.
way that works for us to
Mhm.
keep the world moving forward in a way that celebrates diversity and
Mhm.
inclusion. Those are not bad ideas. Those are the powerful ideas of humanity. And with that, I'll stop the recording.
Okay.
Good.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Good. Mhm.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
Katie,
you.
like we do in the past, we Margaret will render this recording and we'll post it in our Honor Star website. And there's opportunities, I think, to even